Well, hello, neighbor.
Hi.
What's going on, guys? We're the Cinefanatics. My name is Chris Adams.
I'm Robert Adams.
Freaking weirdo. We're doing a review. That's what you clicked on. You saw the title. You're doing a review of A Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood. It's the Mr. Rogers not biopic.
Yeah.
We'll touch on that.
Yeah. So right off the bat, there's not going to be any spoilers in this video. There's really not anything to really...
Just kidding. Nick Fury recruits Mr. Rogers to the Avengers.
Yeah, the Avengers Initiative. He actually should. That would be a really good asset to the team.
Thanos would have been taken down so much quicker.
Yeah. So I want to kind of give like a little bit of background on this. I mean, of the two of us, I am the older brother, and I have to, like, when I was a kid,
Yeah,
I'd say...
he is.
Thanks. When I was a kid, I would say, like, I actually grew up on Mr. Rogers.
We all grew up on Mr. Rogers.
Yeah, I guess.
Yeah, I grew up with him too.
Yeah. I guess. Yeah. Anyways, so going back on the idea of this being a Mr. Rogers biopic, that's what the trailer seemed to really show for this.
Kind of.
And especially because we're watching this trailer, we're coming off of the very popular documentary that came out last year, the Won't You Be My Neighbor?
Yep.
That unfortunately was snubbed in the Oscars, and it should have gotten a nomination.
Huge snub.
So we go into this thinking, yeah, this is going to be a Mr. Rogers biopic. And it's not.
No, this is the loose interpretation inspired by story of, in this movie, Lloyd Vogel, but in real life, what was his name again?
Like Tom Junod or Junod?
Tom Junod.
Wikipedia didn't tell us how to pronounce it.
Yeah, not good with names. Anyway, it's loosely based on his story. He was a writer for Esquire and had to do a piece on Mr. Rogers about, what we consider heroes. Current day heroes.
Roughly while he was going through like a rough patch in his life.
Yeah, issues with, family and all sorts of stuff. The movie was about him. The movie was about him, what he was going through, and how he met Mr. Rogers at just the right time in his life, and how meeting Mr. Rogers changed his life, essentially.
Yeah, so this is another one of those movies I would say that the trailer I don't think the trailer did an adequate job of showing what this movie was actually about. Now, here's the thing with this particular movie. That doesn't necessarily mean the movie was bad.
No, not at all.
There's been a lot of examples where the trailer just did not accurately portray the movie. Downsizing, we're looking at you. And the movie turned out to be really bad. Downsizing. And this movie was actually pretty good.
This movie was really good.
But again, you watch this movie from the standpoint that it is about the writer, and like this movie was essentially filmed and shot as if it almost was an episode of Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood.
Yeah, it kind of bookends a little bit like that, more or less, and just different scenes are posed as almost like vignettes of a story that's being told, complete with transitions.
The transitions were great.
That looked like the little model set from Mr. Rogers, his actual neighborhood.
Yeah.
All of that kind of tied together and gave it just a nice warm feeling to it, because it made you feel like you were watching an episode of Mr. Rogers, more or less. That I thought was really good, because honestly, like throughout this entire movie, I had only two emotions. Either I had like the biggest grin on my face, or I was kind of tearing up a little bit. And that's one thing I do want to touch on real quick, is that because it was his story, this movie did a fantastic job of putting us in his head, in his world, and really like sympathizing with him and what's going on in his life at that moment. Like, I was right there. Sad moments, I was sad. That's what movies are supposed to do, but I really, you really feel it in this.
Yeah, and that, I would say that is in due part to how this movie was actually made. This movie, I feel like this movie is pretty abstract. This movie doesn't flow like a normal movie. There are parts of this movie that just takes you out of a normal linear storyline to like, wow, what's going on? And I think some of this could actually be contributed or attributed by the director, Mariel Heller. If you're not familiar with her, she's made a couple of movies, nothing of huge note, but what is worth noting is where she comes from, her background. She is married to Norma Tacone from Lonely Island. She has had experience working with Lonely Island projects like MacGruber or Popstar.
Yeah.
She's had her hand in that. And when you look at it from that viewpoint, you can kind of see some of that abstract thinking that Lonely Island does in their stuff in this.
There's particularly one scene that especially kind of like leaned into that. I'm not going to give the details of that, but did have to do with the neighborhood of make-believe. And there's it did feel slightly out of place tonally for me. There's a very good reason why it existed, why it was there, and I completely get what the purpose of it was. It was just almost completely different than the rest of the movie, which again, it didn't take me out of the movie. It just felt tonally. It just didn't feel like it necessarily belonged tonally.
But I think like the tone of the movie overall is...
Count how many times we say tone.
Yeah.
Leave it in the comments below.
It is a little different than a normal movie.
Yeah.
It doesn't rock the boat the same way. And I think it took me, I would say, probably about 5 to 10 minutes to really get my like grasp on how this movie is going to play out.
Sea legs.
Yeah. To grasp how this movie is going to go,
Yeah.
And then I was able to flow with it.
Metaphors. It just keeps going.
There's nothing about boats in this movie.
By the way, as it should be noted, Mr. Rogers was not a Navy SEAL, Navy person.
Sniper, yeah.
Yeah, never happened.
Yeah. So, yeah, it takes a little bit to actually get into this movie as to how it's going to feel.
Yeah.
And there's a part of it, one of the things when I'm talking about like how abstract this movie is, there's parts of this that actually kind of made me think back to being John Malkovich. And just how like... Not the dark and depressing parts of it, but just how it's a little weird and not quite normal. There's that in this movie.
I think they had to do that, though, to get you into the position of really being able to connect with Lloyd and how he feels about interacting with Mr. Rogers. What Mr. Rogers feels like to him. Mr. Rogers to him felt abstract. He felt weird. He felt abnormal. Like, this isn't normal life. No one can be this nice.
Yeah. So the intent and purpose of that is for that. Yeah. Definitely agree.
I mean, another piece being like this movie had probably one of the greatest fourth wall breaks ever. We'll say they're in the middle of an Asian restaurant and then just a Chinese food restaurant.
Yeah.
And they had just one of the oddest fourth wall breaks, but I was like, I actually really appreciate this. Mm-hmm. It's strange, but I really appreciate this.
Yeah. So a lot of this is through the eyes of Lloyd, but it's how Lloyd is interpreting his interactions with Fred Rogers.
Yeah.
So speaking of Fred Rogers, of course, we got to jump into Tom Hanks.
Oh, yeah.
Excellent casting.
Who else are you going to get to play him?
You got to get America's favorite father to play America's favorite neighbor. Completely makes sense.
I was going to say it's the nicest guy in the world being portrayed by the second nicest guy in the world.
Yeah, probably. I think Tom Hanks did a fantastic job. Again, this movie opens with him pretty much doing the very usual Mr. Rogers Neighborhood opening, and it's kind of weird that you're settling in. You're like, okay, here comes the nostalgia wave. You're getting into it, and then the door opens and it's Tom Hanks. You're like, that's not normal.
That's true. I mean, here's the thing: like makeup job wise, costume wise. He held physical attributes of Mr. Rogers, did do pretty well with that, but it is still Tom Hanks.
Yeah.
He can't... He sounds like Tom Hanks. He doesn't necessarily sound like Mr. Rogers. He sounds like he's trying to do an imitation of Mr. Rogers.
He had the speech pattern down.
He had the speech pattern down, exactly, but it still was Tom Hanks's voice. Mm-hmm. That's not to say... We're not saying at all at this point that Tom Hanks was a bad pick or he didn't do a good job. He was fantastic as Mr. Rogers.
Absolutely. But
it's just from the beginning you knew it was Tom Hanks walking in.
But I feel like that kind of goes back into that whole abstract thing that you're watching this and they're setting it up to where you're not quite watching a normal movie,
Yeah.
and thereby you're not quite seeing the real Fred Rogers. You're seeing Tom Hanks portraying Fred Rogers, both of whom have very distinct voices, very distinct facial features and expressions. And obviously, they're not the same person.
Right.
And I think that was done on purpose.
Yeah, and that's the thing. He carries the tone. He carries the all the different aspects of Mr. Rogers.
Je ne sais quoi of Fred Rogers. I don't know what.
That's a pull of a word right there. Anyway, he didn't quite feel like Mr. Rogers, but he did feel like Mr. Rogers.
Yeah.
It's a very hard thing to explain. Suffice it to say, when it comes time for award season, I don't know where this movie is going to stand in the awards. Again, the documentary got snubbed last year, so I don't know if it's the same here. But we are at a situation where, at this point, Mr. Rogers isn't the lead character in this movie.
No.
So, does Tom Hanks get a Best Supporting? I think so.
Possibly.
But I also think that Matthew Rhys gets a Best Actor for portraying Lloyd Vogel.
And one thing I would say about the acting real quick, and this is going to be, I guess, kind of hard to explain. We talked about it right after we got out of the movie. Jumping in at the very beginning of the movie, especially the conversations between Lloyd and his wife, the dialogue just didn't seem normal. It was not a natural way that people conversate, and the acting on that seemed a little off. I believe that was done on purpose, though, and therefore I think it was done very well.
So if you're following our review here, I think this movie was great. He thought it was bad, but it was good because it was
good
bad.
because it was supposed to be that way. That the abstract nature of this movie, it was supposed to be exactly like that.
I promise you, he liked the movie.
Oh no, absolutely loved the movie. The movie was fantastic.
Don't be too confused. He liked the movie.
But it's just one of those things. You see something. The simple way to explain it: you see something weird, you see something strange, you still like it. It is possible to see something weird and strange you like it.
It's just not what you expected.
It's not what you expected,
but it works.
It works, and it worked very well.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. Like, the takeaway for me here is that I really did enjoy this movie. Again, like I said earlier, biggest grin or tears from just what was happening emotionally in the movie. Loved it. It's going to go pretty high on my list right now.
Yeah, and that's going to be fun to sit down and see where I line this up on mine as well. So,
Yeah.
As we get closer to the end of the year, we're going to start formulating our top 10 lists of the year. So that'll be interesting to see. Make sure you stay tuned to our channel so you can see that as that comes out. So anyways, I think that's going to pretty much cover it for this.
Yeah, if we're going to give it a rating, can we start doing decimals?
I must.
No, I'm not going to do decimal. So, I mean, we just changed it to out of 10. So, I mean, I would say it's about a. Oh man, it's so hard. I'll give it a 9.
You give it a 9?
I'll give it a 9.
So 9 out of 10 for him. I mean, I really liked this movie. I thought it was fantastic. I need to wrap my head around it a little bit more and watch it again when it comes out for home media. Right now, I'm probably just going to give it an 8 out of 10. Just because of the
How dare you!
Just because of the weirdness of it, I really want to go in. But like
give Mr. Rogers an 8 out of 10.
But the dialogue, the words that they're saying, a lot of that hit some really good spots. And I'm anxious to go back and see and just listen to it again.
Yeah, it's a movie. It's a great movie. It tells a great story. Everybody in the cast. I mean, we didn't even touch Chris Cooper. He did a fantastic job as well. Everybody in this cast really nails their roles. I just really enjoyed the story. So,
yeah. Anyways, that's going to do it for this review. Have you seen this movie? What did you think of it? Let us know down below in the comments. What did you think of this review? Also, let us know about that in the comments. Make sure you follow us on social media. We are at Cinefanatics MLP on Twitter and Instagram. We will be making changes to this channel, so make sure you follow us on social media to stay up on that. Also, we are going to be live streaming. We have hit 1,000 subscribers. We will be live streaming on our channel. That will take place Tuesday, November 26th at 9:30 p.m. Central Time. Make sure you hop on here and follow us. We'll be talking about movies. We'll be talking about personal stuff. So come join us. It's going to be a very fun time, we promise.
Trade agreements and other European nations.
Probably not. No.
Yeah, I'm not good at those.
So make sure you follow us. You can subscribe by hitting the subscribe button down below, or you can also subscribe by hitting the subscribe button up above his head. Over here off to the side are a couple other videos that we have made. And as always,
Won't you be
please won't you be my neighbor. Later.
See ya, neighbor.
Just keep the volume down and please be respectful of your other neighbors.
It's after 10. Please be quiet.